What would you do if the person you trusted most, your wife, was secretly living another life behind hotel doors? In today's story, you'll witness betrayal exposed in the most shocking way when Ethan discovers the truth about Melissa's affair with Derek. This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's about courage, heartbreak, and the moment a man chooses truth over lies. Stay until the end because what unfolds at the Silver Oak Hotel will leave you speechless. You're watching Cheating Stories 7. If you enjoy stories of betrayal and redemption, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us keep sharing more of these real, powerful journeys. Now, let's step into the story. I served my cheating wife divorce papers at her secret hotel affair. Ethan Parker tells himself, again and again, that ordinary love is always built in ordinary rooms. For 16 long years, that belief has felt true. Pasta simmering on Wednesdays, crayon-scrawled math problems left scattered on the counter, bedtime jokes that made the whole house finally exhale. Those years should matter when life turns uneven. Yet lately, all of that history seems to slide from Melissa's shoulders, as if it were dust she can simply brush away. Small frictions now arrive like verdicts. If he forgets to thaw the chicken, it proves he never notices her workload. If he proposes a date and places it on the calendar, it suddenly becomes unromantic, because she insists a real partner anticipates without reminders. Each example lands with a polished reference. Derek Lawson wouldn't need to ask. Derek remembers. Derek surprises. Derek intuits. Ethan swallows the sting of a name that has begun to live in their house like a ghost, even though Derek himself has been nothing but friendly, generous with advice, even warm. So Ethan studies. He orders a book on presents, highlights lines about attention and micro gestures, and shifts his meetings so he can drive Melissa to a late appointment, watching her nap against the window. He slips a note into her bag with a gift card for the coffee shop where she once wrote her first big pitch. Love, he tells himself, is a practice, not a magic trick. He plans a picnic at the lake in Crestwood, the place where they once argued and kissed within the same hour. Lemon cookies, a soft blanket, nostalgia carefully arranged. Melissa thanks him, presses a kiss to his cheek, and then takes a call about a client pulling budget. Ethan packs the basket quietly, reminding himself that thoughtfulness isn't wasted just because gratitude refuses to appear. At night, the bed grows larger with its geography. She turns away to read. He adds pillows like bridges. One evening, he leans in to ask what is funny on her phone. She jerks it to her chest as if shielding a flame. "Privacy, Ethan," she says, and the way she says his name makes him feel like a contractor who forgot his badge at the door. She carries the phone into the bathroom and clicks the lock. He spends the week arguing with that single click. Maybe she is defending the last square inch of a day that work hasn't already colonized. Maybe expecting transparency is unkind when stress is high. Still, the comparisons return with surgical accuracy. Derek would have known, she says, when he guesses the wrong movie. Derek wouldn't need a tutorial, she says, when the surprise restaurant is too loud. Ethan keeps trying new ideas and measures his failures by the long sighs she leaves behind. He notices other edits, subtle but sharp. Melissa dresses for work in sharper lines, higher heels. A new citrus perfume clings to her scarf long after she sleeps, a scent Ethan doesn't recognize from their bathroom shelf. He tells himself new seasons invite new costumes, and he refuses to imagine ghosts behind them. But the absences multiply. A last-minute client dinner, a strategy session that cannot wait, a Saturday check-in that becomes a Sunday return. Melissa's explanations arrive with useful details, polished enough to pass as truth. Ethan wants to believe them because trust is not a math test, but his faith begins to fray. He texts a thumbs up, then adds, "Can I pick you up after?" Hours later, her reply arrives with a heart that he reads 3 different ways, none of them restful. When sleep abandons him, Ethan wanders the house in silence. Lily's room is a coastline of paperbacks. James has taped glow stars to his ceiling like a private emergency map. In the kitchen, the stale smell of coffee insists that morning is possible. He vows, for now, to resist becoming a detective in his own life. But facts nudge anyway. Melissa tells a story about a client dinner, details Ethan recognizes piece by piece from a tale Derek once told at a barbecue. The punchline matches exactly. Ethan laughs on cue, tucks the puzzle piece into his pocket, and says nothing. Another day, when he lifts her blazer to hang it, he finds the corner of a hotel key sleeve. Silver oak, chalk white on gray. He asks without heat. She answers without delay, off-site with the Horizon team, wrong pocket. Long night, plausible enough to live on, at least for now. One Thursday in late fall, Melissa comes home radiant and exhausted. Ethan suggests takeout and a rented movie. She smiles thinly and says she already promised the team a toast. Of course, he answers. She showers. When she leaves, she kisses the air near his cheek and says, "Don't wait up." He doesn't. He sleeps on the sofa and wakes to the sound of her key, the shower running, the night stitched shut without explanation. In the morning, she is cheerful in the brittle way of someone who cannot afford silence. Ethan watches her make coffee and feels something inside him take a step back. He is not ready to accuse. He is not ready to forgive something that hasn't yet been named. He is only ready to admit that his hope has begun checking the weather. What he cannot ignore, finally, is the way his own heartbeat changes when he leans toward her laughter and she leans away. That flinch has the permanence of a reflex. The doubt it plants is small, but it has roots. He does not cut them. He does not water them. He only acknowledges they exist. If this is a storm, it is not the kind that thrashes and clears. It is a slow rearranging of seasons. Spring keeps its flowers. Winter lingers anyway. Ethan decides that repair is no longer a luxury. It is his second job. He rises early, the kitchen light humming above him, reading books about emotional attunement while the coffee brews. He underlines verbs that promise transformation. Listen, reflect, validate. Each word feels like a tool he must learn to use before the house collapses around him. He drafts 3 different dates because choosing one feels like a gamble he cannot afford. Plan A bistro with the lemon risotto she once adored. Plan B, trivia night at the library where laughter might grow from shared cleverness. Plan C, a drive back to their college town, passing the dorm window where their initials are still faintly carved if you tilt your head. Each plan is earnest, each plan is graded. Sweet, she says about the bistro, but not spontaneous. Cute, she says of trivia, but too try-hard. The drive nearly succeeds, until an email pings. She cannot spend a Sunday in nostalgia when Monday's presentation is already unraveling. Ethan cancels the babysitter with a quiet resignation. Being a grown-up, he reminds himself, means changing plans without sulking. He tries again. He brings her coffee at the dining table, shaping the foam into a clumsy heart. She thanks him without looking up. He prints her agenda. She slides it into a stack without pause. He would laugh at the absurdity, if only he were not keeping score against himself. He asks for feedback because the books call it love in work clothes. "You should already know," she answers flatly. He translates her silence into tasks and begins leaving notes. "Proud of you after client calls, thinking of you before big pitches. Sorry you had to carry that when Derek delegated down." The notes make him feel useful. The notes make her purse heavier. When Ethan runs out of ideas, he borrows Derek's. In the break room at backyard cookouts, Derek offers small marital tips with the ease of someone who already owns the script. Take the kids Saturday so she can sleep. Book the spa near Horizon. They are miracle workers. Let her pick the restaurants. Ethan swallows the sting of getting advice from the man Melissa praises most. This is humility, he tells himself. But humility stretches into shape-shifting. Ethan trims his wants into the margins. He stops inviting friends over because Melissa calls their laughter loud. He suppresses his jokes because she hates puns. He changes the music because she once called his playlists predictable. Each compromise is small, but together they accumulate like pennies in a jar. One day the jar is heavy, and he realizes he cannot pretend it is weightless anymore. The children notice first. Lily tilts her head and asks why Mom sighs so much and why Dad folds napkins smaller now. Ethan replies gently, "People get tired in different seasons." James senses the weather without asking. He simply sits closer to Ethan on movie nights, the way animals move to higher ground before a storm. Still, Ethan refuses to turn love into surveillance. He does not guess passwords. He does not install trackers. Trust, he believes, can die from suspicion just as surely as from secrets. So he governs what he can. His attention, his tone, the small courtesies that once mattered and might matter again. He texts Melissa before her meetings to wish her luck. He mouths goodnight across the pillow even when she pretends to be asleep. Some nights the silence in their bedroom feels medicinal, the body shutting down non-essential systems to survive. Apologies dissolve in that silence, so do invitations. When Melissa turns her back to the wall, her shoulder becomes a gate that will not budge. Ethan studies the dresser's outline in the dim light and tells himself that patience is not passivity, even when it looks like stillness. On Friday, he buys tickets to a gallery opening because Melissa once lingered at paintings as if they spoke only to her. She arrives late, mouth set in a straight line. "Rain check?" she asks, already halfway down the hall. He hangs the tickets on the fridge, lets them expire in silence. Saturday morning, he takes the kids to the farmer's market to escape the echo at home. Lily tests pottery handles. James chooses the misshapen strawberries because they look honest. Ethan buys a loaf of bread from the woman who remembers his name and thinks, with sudden clarity, how ordinary affection is the rarest luxury of all. Back home, Melissa sits on the patio, squinting at a slide deck on her laptop. He sets the strawberries on the table. "Thank you," she says, like a person asking for the salt, not like a wife seeing her husband. That night, Derek texts the group thread about the weekend game. Ethan replies with a joke, and it earns 3 laugh emojis and a classic from Derek. The word lands on him like a pat on the head. Later, Derek messages privately, "Hang in, man." These stretches happen. Ethan types back thanks, surprised by the warmth he can still feel for a man he is beginning to resent in self-defense. He tells himself he is auditioning for a role worth keeping, even if the director refuses to give him notes. What he does not yet realize is that the scene was blocked months ago, the lines memorized without him, and the curtain already up. He only knows that he is still on stage, speaking his part to the dark, praying the light will find him before the house empties. The phone becomes its own character at night. First a glow, then a hum, then a wall drawn down the mattress between them. Midnight pings arrive like whispers from another world. A muffled laugh that does not belong to the room they built together flickers across Melissa's face. The screen tilts away, the blue light carving her cheekbone into the shape of someone else's attention. Ethan says her name softly, the way you might tap a window just to see if the glass is still whole. She snaps the case shut with the urgency of someone guarding a diary. "Privacy, Ethan," she says, and the authority in her voice makes shame obey even before Ethan can reply. The next morning, he tries reason, steadying his words like fragile dishes. "Tell me if I'm missing something," he says, because the distance feels deliberate. But Melissa detonates before he even reaches the question mark. Control, prying, distrust. "After all the years I've given you." Her cadence is less conversation than closing argument. Ethan backs out of the doorway like a student who opened the wrong classroom. His hands ache for a task his heart cannot perform. That evening, she slides the phone across the table with the calm of a magician revealing an empty hat. "See? Nothing. Threads are skeletal. Calendars appear tidy. Timestamps carry a vinegar tang. The gaps glare brighter than the text." He could ask why Wednesday shows 2 messages when he sat beside her for an hour listening to her laugh. But he doesn't. Proof matters, yes, so does dignity. He nods, returns the phone to its little blanket of plausible deniability, then walks into the hallway and leans his forehead against the cool paint, waiting for relief that never comes. Truth does not need a confession to exist, it only needs time. The bedroom collects a silence different from before. the museum type, where alarms lurk just beyond the velvet rope. Ethan inventories what he still trusts. Lily's eye roll when he sings off-key. James's serial engineering at breakfast. The price of tomatoes at the Saturday market. He would like to add his wife to that list, but lists prefer nouns, and Melissa has become all adjectives: busy, overwhelmed, misunderstood. He counts the seams in the drywall like rosary beads searching for steady ground. Outside the door, the commentary changes. Melissa praises Derek's emotional intelligence, the way he listens, how he notices patterns before they break. Ethan hears the shape of what she implies. Derek reads the room while Ethan reads instructions. He confides in no one. At work, he ships a design review with clean edges. At home, he wipes the counter like a man erasing his own fingerprints. He keeps repeating that trust deserves one more chance, even as he quietly begins backing up photos, saving emails, tightening budgets, archiving small scraps that feel like clues. On a Tuesday evening, Melissa returns late, trailing that citrus perfume that has become its own calendar. Ethan asks if she ate. "Yes," she says, and then describes a meeting whose punchline he had already heard from Derek at the last cookout. A camera clicks behind Ethan's eyes. He smiles anyway, places a glass of water in front of her, and tells himself he has never been a jealous man. But he is precise, and precision is a terrible companion for lies. The children read the weather faster than adults admit. Lily drifts into the kitchen, delivers a joke, and Melissa laughs half a beat too late. James sets his math test beside Ethan's plate without speaking. Ethan writes small notes: "Proud of you, thank you for the joke," because encouragement is the only currency that never loses its value in a storm. One night the ping returns. Melissa tilts the screen. Ethan refuses to lean. He stares instead at the dark window, their reflections hovering like ghosts. If she is unhappy, why not say what would help? If she is happy, why hide? He imagines the uncomfortable middle, happy elsewhere, unhappy here, and unable to confess either truth. Sleep fractures into 2-hour segments. A zipper whispers, a bathroom door sighs, a text vibrates on the nightstand. Ethan repeats to himself, "You are safe, you are steady. You will not humiliate the people you love, even if they forget how to love you back." By month's end, he stops rehearsing confrontations and begins practicing exits that will not make him a stranger to himself. He deletes a draft he'll never send. Who is he to you? He keeps another draft alive. "When you are ready to talk honestly, I will listen." That note sits like a spare key under the mat, useful maybe, but also an invitation. For now, he waits. Trust gets one last chance, and Ethan knows, with a clarity he will not yet say aloud, that if it breaks again, it will not be because he failed to hold on. It will be because the rope was always leading somewhere else. The favor Ethan asks seems small, almost harmless. Could his friend Mason take a look at an old device that Melissa no longer uses? No passwords are broken, no lines of law are crossed. Mason is simply the kind of man who backs up his backups for sport, who can find dust in a phone's attic where others see nothing. They work in Ethan's garage with the door half open, the cold of Crestwood slipping under boxes of Halloween costumes and kindergarten art. Mason's fingers move quickly, his silence deliberate. When he finally looks up, what he offers back is incomplete but sharp enough to cut. Fragments. Suggestive lines without their preface or their aftermath. A string of hotel addresses that do not correspond to client sites, including the chalk-white sleeve Ethan once glimpsed. Silver Oak Hotel. Calendar blocks labeled strategy that mirror Derek Lawson's out-of-town trips down to the day. A rideshare receipt from a neighborhood with no ties to Horizon Media at an hour with no ties to business. Each piece alone could be dismissed. Together they sketch a shape no mercy can redraw. Ethan does not print anything. He photographs screens the way a man photographs damage for an insurance claim, close enough to preserve, far enough not to stare. He thanks Mason, asks him to forget the afternoon. Mason doesn't ask questions. Friends who have walked through storms understand the quiet required to keep another person standing. When Ethan sits in his car afterward, the engine off, he does not think first of rage. He thinks of Lily's braces appointment, James's soccer cleats, the fragile scaffolding of Mondays that cannot be allowed to collapse. Protect them, keep their world from buckling. He tells himself nothing changes tonight. Dinner will be tacos, homework will be fractions. Bedtime will still include the knock-knock joke James refuses to retire. He will not set the house on fire just to prove it is made of wood. Still, the air has shifted. A pressure sits on his chest, insistent, undeniable. He rehearses a confrontation in his head and sees it collapse in 3 lines. What is this? Paranoia. Who is he to you? Control. Melissa's outrage is a weather system of its own, fogging the instruments before he can chart a direction. Pride whispers one command, walk. Hope argues back, families can be mended if the damage is faced. Ethan chooses a third voice, one so quiet he barely recognizes it as strength. Document. Verify. Refuse to be rushed into a decision born of shock. So he begins a ledger no one else will read. Dates that match receipts. A list of hotels within an hour's drive, including Silver Oak. Strategy sessions that land on weekends. Derek's public photos posted with careless pride aligning too neatly with Melissa's out-of-office replies. Ethan is not searching for humiliation. He is building a record he can stand on when the ground tilts beneath him. At home, he plays the part of ordinary. He fries tortillas while James explains a science video about gravity. Lily rolls her eyes at a pun and then smirks, forgiveness wrapped in sarcasm. Melissa arrives late, hair damp, a citrus perfume preceding her into the kitchen like a sermon. She kisses the air in Ethan's direction and asks if there's any taco meat left. He serves her a plate, a glass of water. The room feels like a museum of itself, familiar objects behind glass untouchable. Later, when the kids are asleep and the dishwasher hums, Ethan opens a window toward honesty without summoning a storm. You've seemed far away, he says softly, and I don't know how to meet you anymore. Melissa's eyes harden instantly like a door chain snapped across an entry. Don't start again. We've been over this. I am drowning at work, and you're turning it into a trust exercise. Her script is polished. Her lines have no fingerprints. Ethan nods once and retreats, unwilling to argue a play whose ending has already been written. He remembers the ethic that guided their first years, back when they were broke but generous. Do not humiliate each other. It was their rule for public fights and private cruelties, a promise not to turn a lapse into a performance. He clings to it now, even as humiliation finds him anyway, in the shape of a hotel logo in a calendar block that smiles like a dare. That night, the phone glows again, rotating away like a sunflower that prefers another sun. Ethan lies awake, cataloging the choices that still belong to him. He can remain decent. He can remain clear. He can protect the children from theatrics. He can hold a line so straight it feels like absence. He can wait long enough to see whether truth will confess itself or whether he will have to read it aloud. Waiting is not pretending. He updates the ledger with times, with innocuous descriptions, not because he wants to prosecute a life, but because memory bends under pressure. He will need a spine made of facts when the room begins to spin. Before switching off the lamp, he adds one final entry written like a vow. Do not let pain turn you into someone you would not trust with your children. The house settles around him. Pipes sigh. In the dark, Ethan's hand finds the cold side of the mattress where Melissa is not. He is not praying, not exactly. He is taking inventory. What remains? What must be let go? What can still be rebuilt? If rebuilt with beams of truth, not lies dressed as studs. They meet on neutral ground, a quiet booth at Harbor Street Cafe, where the hiss of the espresso machine covers the tremors people try to hide in their voices. Ethan arrives early, choosing the seat that faces the door. Claire arrives exactly on time, sliding into the booth opposite with a steadiness that belongs to someone who has already cried where no one could see. I brought what I could, she says, placing a slim folder and a cracked phone gently on the table. Her voice is even, but her hands betray a small tremor. I didn't have to dig. He doesn't cover his tracks as well as she does. Derek, unlike Melissa, has not mastered the art of erasure. Claire scrolls with a practiced thumb, the messages blooming into view like wounds reopening. Nicknames that make Ethan's jaw tighten. Timestamps that rhyme with the entries in his hidden ledger. Photos cropped to hide faces but showing everything else that matters. Hotel confirmations, Silver Oak again. Rideshare receipts to neighborhoods with no business at all. Calendar blocks that mirror Melissa's strategy sessions down to the minute. When Claire swipes toward the camera roll, Ethan looks away. She doesn't force it. Mercy, even here, still has a place. They compare notes with a precision that feels surgical. Ethan offers dates. Claire supplies locations. He names weekends. She matches them with invoices. The timeline stretches backward month by month until it lands on a winter 2 years past, back when Melissa first praised Derek's emotional intelligence. Ethan had believed she meant her boss was one of the rare decent men. It turns out she meant something else entirely. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, Claire admits, not apologizing for the sentence. Her eyes stay steady on the table. I thought we were bored, not broken. I told myself storms pass if you just hold on, Ethan answers, surprised by the clarity in his own voice. But this wasn't weather, it was a route. Claire nods like someone signing off on a diagnosis. If they want each other, she says, steel threading through every syllable, then let them pay the full price. They begin drafting rules because pain without boundaries turns into its own weapon. No affair between them now or later. No using each other as anesthesia. No decisions made from rage that a good night's sleep would unravel. If either of them wavers, the other will remind them of the children before reminding them of the evidence. It is not romance, it is survival, and survival requires clarity. Claire has already started her own ledger, a twin to Ethan's, same weeks, same hotels, different coats in the closet. She speaks of her daughters and her voice warms. She speaks of Derek and her tone drops to a temperature designed to preserve facts, not feelings. Ethan recognizes himself in that shift. Do you want to see the photos? Claire asks, offering him a choice he wishes someone had once offered her. No, Ethan says, grateful that he means it. I already know more than I ever wanted to. So they turn to logistics, the adult work beneath the wreckage, serving papers without spectacle, shielding the children from gossip that grows teeth, coordinating timelines so lies cannot find daylight. Claire suggests that service should happen in a place that cannot be reinterpreted later, a place where misunderstanding has no alibi. Ethan resists at first until he realizes discretion is not softness, it is precision, and precision is what he needs. The check arrives. Claire reaches for it. Ethan stops her hand with a palm and a faint smile. Let me, he says, not as chivalry but as punctuation. When the server leaves, silence lingers for a beat, strange, heavy, but not hostile. I'm not strong, Claire says finally, as if correcting a rumor before it spreads. I'm just done being managed. Maybe that's what strength looks like, Ethan answers. The line doesn't feel borrowed from a book, it feels carved from bone. They step out into the afternoon where Crestwood pretends nothing unusual is happening. On the sidewalk, they set one final boundary. If either of them begins mistaking clarity for comfort, they will say so aloud and step back. They shake on it like colleagues finalizing a contract that might save 4 children from preventable harm. Back in his car, Ethan doesn't cry. He doesn't rage. He lets the ledger in his mind click forward with awful precision. The dates align. The receipts rhyme. The betrayal forms a rope that can finally be cut, not endlessly knotted. That evening, Melissa breezes into their home with news about a campaign and a joke about Derek's impeccable timing. Ethan sets a plate on the table, nodding at her words as if attending a meeting he already knows he will never sit through again. His phone buzzes once. Claire's message, attorney available tomorrow, document checklist attached. Neutral language confirmed. Ethan replies with one word, ready. He is not eager for spectacle. He will not humiliate the mother of his children in public, but he will act decisively. He will gather proof, protect Lily and James, and cut the rope with hands steady enough to hold the future. If Melissa wants Derek, the full price will include the receipt. Claire calls it a paper bridge, thin, patient, engineered to carry a weight far heavier than feelings. She is the one who names the folders, who color codes the timelines, who draws arrows between Ethan's bank alerts and Derek's leadership off-sites. Ethan's handwriting fills the margins with plain domestic facts. Lily's recital fee cleared on the 17th. James's dentist on the 21st. Melissa's client dinner on the 22nd. Nothing screams, but everything points. When Ethan lifts the binder, it feels heavier than paper. It feels like a verdict. Claire's attorney, a compact woman named Hart, reads like a metronome. Every phrase measured, every pause deliberate. "You don't need fireworks," she says, tapping the corner of a policy handbook from Melissa's firm. "You need clarity. Service during a false work emergency removes ambiguity, and a neutral public venue prevents claims of intimidation." Ethan thinks of humiliation, of hotel carpets that have absorbed the endings of countless other lives. "I don't want a scene," he mutters. "You're not staging a scene," Hart replies. "You're staging the truth." The words land inside him with a dull thud. Truth has always been quieter than spectacle, but now it feels like the only weapon worth holding. They set constraints before they set tactics. No surprises for the children, no gloating, no explanations longer than a sentence. Ethan rehearses that single sentence under his breath while folding laundry, while rinsing dishes, while tying James's cleats. "We have to end our marriage." The papers explain why. He hates how steady it sounds, how reasonable, but reason is all he has left. On Thursday, Melissa announces the weekend fire drill. Her tone is breezy, a shrug practiced in front of mirrors. "Crisis at Lawson and Larch," she says, eyes floating just past Ethan's shoulder. 2 days, tops. Ethan nods like a husband grateful for forewarning. Later, he texts Hart a single word, green. 10 minutes later, her reply appears with the sheriff liaison's contact. The plan is no longer an idea. It is a clock ticking. Friday morning, he calls his mother. "Can the kids camp out Saturday night?" he asks, aiming for casual. Her pause says she knows, even before her voice turns warm. "Of course. Tell them to bring the board games. They never let me win." He books a sitter for Friday until bedtime, just in case. Logistics, not suspicion. That is the story he tells himself, because it is the only story that keeps him steady. That afternoon, he meets Sergeant Ruiz in a quiet corner of a coffee shop 2 blocks from the Silver Oak Hotel. Ruiz is unremarkable in the way that makes people tell him everything. He lays out the choreography with a pen cap on a napkin. "We'll serve in the lobby, short, neutral, verifiable. I introduce myself, confirm identity, hand documents. You do not argue, you do not follow, you do not touch." Ethan stares at the tiny piece of plastic marking the stage where his marriage will end. "What if she tries to talk?" Ruiz raises an eyebrow. "Then you let me talk. You're here to finish paperwork, not a marriage." That night, Ethan packs like a soldier preparing for a campaign. Wallet and ID, keys on a spare ring, phone charger, a paper copy of the custody proposal annotated in Hart's blue ink, a granola bar, because people faint on empty stomachs, and he refuses to let Melissa write that narrative. At the bottom of the duffel, he slides in a folded photo Lily once took of the 4 of them on a pier. He doesn't know if it is a relic or a compass. Maybe both. He writes the children a note for Saturday morning, pancake day at Grandma's. Don't forget the maple syrup treaty. He can already picture Lily smirking, James underlining treaty 3 times. Normal, he thinks, is the last gift he can give them for a few more hours. When Melissa emerges from the bedroom with a garment bag and a work tote, Ethan offers to carry them. "I've got it," she says quickly, too quickly, as if weight itself has become a secret. He lets the door swing shut behind her, his hand lingering on the space she didn't allow him to touch. On the drive to Silver Oak, the asphalt hums like a low-grade alarm beneath the tires. The hotel rises at the edge of downtown, all glass and shine, a temple to forgetting. He parks on the 3rd level of the garage, 2 aisles over from the elevators. Not to spy, he tells himself. To breathe. He texts Ruiz a single letter. H. From the mezzanine, he watches the lobby perform its usual play. Bellmen wheeling chrome carts, a fountain whispering in white noise, the concierge laughing with only her mouth. He checks the door, the clock, the urge to bolt. The plan is a tunnel, he reminds himself. Looking left or right only deepens the darkness. Claire arrives in a navy blazer that fits like armor. "You okay?" she asks, not as cliché, but as measurement. "I won't be," Ethan answers, "but I will do this." She nods once. That is the only acceptable answer. Hart appears by the revolving doors, phone pressed to her ear, scanning for Ruiz. "Move to the left pillar when I signal," she instructs. "Minimize crossing paths." Claire squeezes Ethan's shoulder for 3 long beats, then steps back into her own orbit. Two fools, he thinks, finally behaving like adults. Ruiz materializes, calm wrapped in a suit that doesn't announce itself. "Ready?" he asks. It isn't a question. Ethan swallows. "Ready." Hart raises 2 fingers, the signal. Claire's phone buzzes. Derek has checked in. The elevator numbers tick down. Ethan feels time as if it were rope burning through his hands. Melissa steps into the lobby in a cream robe and hotel slippers, her hair piled into a knot that pretends to be careless. The sight hits Ethan like a shovel. He thought rage would come. Instead, Numor arrives at how ordinary the end of a life can look. She spots him, freezes. Then she starts to smile, the kind designed to recast a scandal as a misunderstanding. "What are you?" she begins. But Ruiz is already there, badge displayed, voice measured. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Ruiz with the sheriff's office. Are you Melissa Ann Parker?" Melissa blinks, confused, then nods. The envelope passes into her hands as if it were just mail. And with that, the plan ceases to be theory. It becomes history. The lobby smells of polished wood and lemon, a cleanliness too pristine to admit that endings often unfold here. Ethan sits in a chair that looks comfortable but isn't, watching the fountain speak in tidy white noise while the deputy makes a quiet call upstairs. The concierge smiles at strangers as if nothing in the world ever breaks. Doors exhale. The elevator numbers tick down like a metronome attached to his ribs. Sergeant Ruiz slips his phone into his pocket. "They're sending her down," he says, his voice pitched low enough to steady a table. Ethan nods, the duffel at his feet heavy with nothing but paper and resolve. The elevator opens with a bell that deserves a better moment. Melissa steps out, hair twisted into a knot that pretends to be careless, a cream hotel robe and slippers that mock the sacredness of home. She spots Ethan, blinks, and pastes on a puzzled smile, the kind designed to recast betrayal as misunderstanding. Ruiz is already moving, badge displayed, calm professionalism wrapped around the moment like tape. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Ruiz with the sheriff's office. Are you Melissa Ann Parker?" Melissa's eyes flick from the badge to Ethan, searching for the trick. "Yes," she says after a beat. "What is this?" Ruiz confirms her date of birth, her address, then places the envelope into her palm. It lands soft like a letter but detonates like a bomb. She stares at the seal as if it might apologize, then peels it open. Paper whispers. Sentences bloom. Her face cycles through confusion, fury, bargaining, weather patterns crashing through a narrow pass. "Ethan," she breathes, stepping forward. "What are you doing?" He keeps his gaze fixed on Ruiz's shoulder seam, an anchor in a room spinning with history. His voice is stripped of decoration. "You had an affair. I'm leaving." 2 seconds pass, tiny and enormous. Then the silence collapses. "This is insane," Melissa snaps. "You can't ambush me in a lobby. Let's go upstairs and talk like adults." Ruiz raises a calm hand, never quite a stop sign, but enough. "Ma'am, please remain where you are." Her hand finds Ethan's forearm, fingers clamping down through cotton. "You don't understand, it wasn't." She breaks off as he steps back. The grip slips. The deputy is between them before the apology can finish dressing itself as reason. "Please release him," Ruiz says, though she already has. Melissa glances around, desperate for an ally, as if the marble might rise into a chorus. But there is no chorus. Only a bellman steering a chrome cart, a tourist adjusting a scarf, the fountain keeping its promise to speak of nothing. You blindsided me, she hisses, voice lowered to wound in private. After everything I've done for this family. Ethan hears the script try to return from the dead and declines his role. The papers explain the rest, he answers. Read them with your attorney. The sentence tastes like iron in his mouth. He swallows anyway. Ethan, please. She pleads louder now, his name breaking at the edges. Don't do this to the kids. Don't do this to us. He thinks of Lily's quick laugh, of James underlining treaty 3 times, of Saturdays that can still be ordinary if he is stubborn in the right ways. I am doing this for them, he says, not louder, only truer. The elevator sighs again, spilling another guest into the lobby. They freeze, catching the scene mid-story. Melissa's voice rises, shame colliding with fury. It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. People recover from worse. Ethan could recite 2 years' worth of not mistakes, but Ruiz's steady presence is the mercy he hadn't known he would need. Sir, Ruiz says softly, we're done. The word done is not a request, it is a door opening. Ethan raises a hand, not blessing, not anger, just goodbye. His legs move without drama, remembering how to walk. Behind him, a paper flutters. A plea climbs the marble, a voice cracks against the ceiling. He does not turn. The sliding doors release him into the parking lot, where the air carries no perfume and no apology. Wind lifts a stray receipt and drops it again. The sky above is a clean, unbroken blue that refuses to participate in spectacle. He pauses beside his car and breathes, not the shallow, rationed air he has survived on for months, but the kind that fills the lungs all the way to the bottom. The first inhale surprises him. The second feels like a decision. His phone buzzes, Hart's efficient text, service completed. Timestamp saved, video archived. Claire's text follows, one word, here. Ethan pockets the phone, rests both hands on the warm roof of his car, and lets the steadiness settle. For a long half-minute, he watches the garage gates rise and fall, the simple machinery of exit and return. He has chosen exit, and for the first time in months, he feels the air is something he can live in. The house receives him first, before Melissa does. The creak on the third stair, the dog's collar chime, the faint smell of cinnamon from a candle someone lit as if scent could erase truth. Silence lands heavier than shouting. Ethan sets his keys in the bowl by the door, and the sound feels like a verdict rolling through every room they built together. Melissa circles him like unstable weather, cycling through temperatures that don't belong in the same sky. You're cruel, she accuses, pupils wide with fury. The next breath softens into apology. You misunderstood, it was only physical, it meant nothing, we can fix this. Her hand flutters toward therapy, toward remorse, toward the kids. Ethan points back at timelines, 2 years of them, each entry a nail in the coffin of their marriage. This isn't a misread text, he says, voice even. It's a pattern. She wants privacy in the bedroom. She wants the lights low, the old rhythm of intimacy that once quieted storms. Just talk to me in there, she pleads, hand on the knob as if the door itself could rewind time. One last time, let me show you I choose you. Ethan steps back. We are not negotiating in the place we sleep, he answers, his words cut sharp even to his own ears. Sex isn't a bandage for a wound that's still bleeding. He keeps the line anyway. He will not be lured into the cycle where intimacy meant amnesia. Dinner is a truce served in bowls. Lily studies them both like a juror trying to read closing arguments. Are we breaking? She asks, aiming for casual but failing. Ethan swallows the taste of lemon cleaner and memory. Love doesn't end just because a marriage does, he says carefully. We are still your parents. We will still show up. Lily nods, not convinced but willing to delay panic. James waits until dishes clatter before asking, did I do something wrong? His socks are crooked, his face open. Ethan kneels to meet his eyes. No, he says, steady once and only once. This isn't yours to carry. He taps James's chest. Your job is to be a kid. James's shoulders drop and Ethan feels a complicated ache, grateful for the boy's relief, furious that he ever had to bear the weight in the first place. Later that night, Ethan sets ground rules at the kitchen island, his voice even, his tone stripped of heat. We speak in front of the calendar, not the children. We write what we agree to. We don't argue after 10. Melissa bristles, then nods because paper now speaks louder than feelings. When she reaches for his hand, he points to the notebook instead. It is not cruelty. It is how you stop bleeding. Messages begin to orbit. Derek scrambles, lawyered up, image-conscious, indignant rather than ashamed. This will hurt everyone, he sends through Melissa's phone, confusing threat for wisdom. Claire does not flinch. Her replies arrive crisp, documented, CC'd to HR and counsel, the linguistic equivalent of a locked gate. Postures flatten into paperwork. Night makes brave plans brittle. Around midnight, Melissa appears in the doorway, softer, smaller. I made an appointment, she says, sliding her phone across the counter, a confirmation glowing on the screen. Therapy, real therapy. I'll read whatever you want. I'll tell whoever you want. I'm sorry. The word arrives naked, stripped of excuses. Ethan lets it land but doesn't mistake it for enough. I'm glad you'll do the work, he says quietly. Do it for you, for them. He gestures down the hall, not as payment for me. He sleeps on the couch because sometimes a boundary needs a body to prove it exists. The living room clock ticks like a metronome, measuring steadiness instead of chaos. He stares at the ceiling and catalogs the losses he refuses to let the kids inventory later. 1 table, 2 sets of towels, holidays with new choreography. He imagines Lily rolling her eyes at his jokes again, James underlining treaty 3 times. A future can be smaller and still be good. Morning insists on itself. Lunch boxes, homework forms, a permission slip for the planetarium that makes Ethan smile despite everything. The universe is still larger than their story. Melissa moves through the kitchen with politeness that stings. Thank you for packing their snacks, she says as if gratitude could sandpaper the edges off betrayal. You don't have to thank me for being their dad, he replies gently because harshness would only make a new mess. News leaks outward in vague circles. A neighbor texts an ambiguous thinking of you. Melissa's sister suggests a weekend away to reset, as if rest were the missing ingredient. Derek sends a performative apology through counsel, polished like a brand guideline. Claire sends Ethan a single, grounding sentence. Video and timestamps are secure. By evening, the story that once lived in shadows is reduced to paperwork and dates. No more narrative fog. No more policed tone. No more reality bending to fit a lie. Melissa retreats to the bedroom with a book she doesn't read. Ethan takes the couch again, this time by choice. His last thought before sleep is not victory or rage, but a plain sentence he couldn't say until now. We can do hard things and still be decent. The house hums as if relieved to be told the truth. Pipes settle. The dog sighs. In the dark, Ethan holds the line he drew and discovers that the line now holds him back. The first wave arrives disguised as concern. Melissa begins forwarding articles with titles that sound like verdicts already carved in stone. How couples rebuild after betrayal, post-infidelity growth, why leaving too soon hurts the kids. She highlights passages about grit, about forgiveness, about the danger of catastrophizing. Ethan reads them the way a lifeguard reads weather, calmly, without pretending clouds are not clouds. Friends divide into 2 camps that wear the same uniform. The sincere urge him to slow down. The nosy circle closer, fishing for a better story. Think of the children, they say, as if he hasn't already organized his whole life around pancakes, permission slips, and bedtime jokes designed to keep the house breathing. Think of the vows, as if vows were built to conceal 2 years of daily deceit. Think of the sunk costs, though no one had spoken that phrase when he was carrying the marriage alone. Melissa runs her outreach like a campaign. She sends him photos from a therapist's waiting room, a screenshot of a reading list, paragraphs that sound rehearsed and raw at once. I never planned to leave you, she types. It was a fantasy. I was insecure. I forgot who I was. Ethan believes her and doesn't, because a thing can be called a fantasy and still be the sharpest knife in the drawer. Family joins the chorus with maps that are outdated. His mother, kind and frightened, wonders aloud if space might help. Melissa's sister calls with anecdotes about a couple who survived an affair and are now stronger than ever, as if betrayal were an earthquake that improved the bridge it nearly destroyed. Ethan thanks the people who mean well. The rest he lets drift past like flyers stuck to a windshield. At night, Melissa stands at the edge of the couch where he sleeps. Her eyes wet, her voice sharpened. "You're punishing me, you're bitter." He lets the labels pass, refusing to try on clothes that do not fit. Bitter sounds like theater. What he feels is simpler clarity. He answers in the same tone he uses when telling James to tie his shoes, calm, firm, unshakable. "I will be courteous, I will be consistent, I will be firm. I will not rehearse the indictment every time you ask for absolution, and I will not trade the children's quiet for temporary peace." Pressure changes its mask when it doesn't work. Melissa pivots from articles to anecdotes, from apologies to appeals. She sits on the kitchen floor like they're back in their first apartment. "Remember when we were broke and you said we'd make a life anyway? Remember how we laughed at the ugly carpet and promised nothing would break us?" Ethan remembers. Memory is not a contract. He pours her a glass of water, sets it near her knee, and points toward the calendar where custody weeks are already penciled in with neutral ink. On Sunday, a well-meaning friend invites him for coffee, speaking earnestly about grace. Ethan listens because he knows that discipline without compassion can sour into cruelty. The friend suggests forgiveness as a practice, not a pardon. Ethan replies that he is practicing it already, by refusing to scream, by refusing to humiliate, by keeping the children outside the blast radius. Forgiveness, he says, is not the same as reunion. The friend nods, chastened by the distinction he had come to teach. The kids feel the tremors, though not the campaign. Lily experiments with sarcasm, testing its edge as armor. Ethan names it for what it is, grief in disguise, and she puts it down for now. James, more practical, negotiates for Friday pizza as a permanent treaty. Ethan agrees. Rituals, he thinks, are scaffolding when the walls shift. Melissa's patience thins, her words sharpen to barbs. "You're unforgiving. You're not the man I married." Ethan almost laughs at the irony of being told he changed by the person who became someone else in secret. "Maybe I'm not," he answers evenly. "I am the father of Lily and James. That is the only role I intend to keep." The title fits him better than husband ever did, and it is the one he refuses to return. There are moments when exhaustion tempts him to bend, not because her arguments are persuasive, but because fatigue is. Each time, he steadies himself with the same blunt math, 2 years. He repeats it until emotion obeys. Love deserves mourning. It does not deserve amnesia. By month's end, the pressure has learned his edges. Melissa still sends articles, he doesn't mock them. She still asks for another chance, he doesn't weaponize his refusal. The house becomes courteous the way airports are courteous. Lines marked, instructions clear, everyone pretending they didn't arrive crying. Ethan signs another set of papers from his attorney and places them in the folder labeled Next. The label comforts him in its simplicity. He imagines a future where the only title he needs is written in small letters across his palm, Father. He traces it with his thumb like a private oath. For the first time since the lobby, he feels not just steady, he feels free. Ethan agrees to therapy the way you agree to stitches, not because you want them, but because healing without them will scar. The waiting room smells of tea and clean carpet, the air padded against sharp words. Melissa sits rigid in her chair, a tissue folded into a perfect square in her hand, as if neatness might undo chaos. "Doctor," Patel greets them with the calm, precise voice of someone who delivers weather alerts. Steady, impossible to ignore, designed to carry people through storms. Ethan sets his jaw. "This isn't reconciliation," he clarifies before intake begins. "It's triage, a way to exit without burning the house down." Dr. Patel nods once, then that's our scope. The first session is unexpectedly useful. Melissa does not try to perform innocence. She says it plainly the way a guilty person names a fact when pretense is too heavy. "I cheated. I lied for 2 years. I hid the person I became from the person I promised to be." She doesn't reach for excuses. She names the harm instead. Trust hollowed out, children forced into crossfire, a husband pushed into detective work he never wanted. Dr. Patel steers the conversation away from a courtroom tone, no cross-examinations, no scorekeeping. They talk about grief in straight lines. Apology can't carry grief for someone else. Closure must be built by the one who was hurt. Between sessions, the house obeys new rules. Exchanges happen by text. The shared calendar becomes the voice neither of them can weaponize. When a day runs hot, bedtime shifts by 10 minutes. No debates after 10. Ethan responds to conflict with short, factual notes because tone is a fuse and fuses exist to burn. Session 2 feels more like a meadow with hidden holes. Before the chairs are warm, Melissa speaks. I need you to cut contact with Claire. The word need lands like a subpoena. It's inappropriate. It feels like you're prepping a revenge affair. Ethan's answer is ready. His voice is calm, stripped of apology. No, Claire is a boundary, not a breach. She's a co-victim. She helped me stay decent. Friendship under fire is an infidelity. Dr. Patel lifts a hand. Pause. Melissa, is this about safety, image, or emotion? Melissa's throat tightens. All three. People will assume things. I will assume things. Dr. Patel turns to Ethan. You're non-negotiable. My boundaries are mine, Ethan replies. I won't outsource them to the person who broke them. The therapist runs a thought experiment. If repair were possible, what would it require? Melissa lists conditions: full transparency, timelines, restitution, years of consistency. Dr. Patel looks at Ethan. He shakes his head. I'm not moving the goalposts. The game is over. I'm here to build a future where our kids can breathe, not to reframe 2 years of deceit as a rough patch. Silence does something useful. Honest words settle into the furniture. Melissa's shoulders drop as if gravity finally caught up. So what can we do here? She asks, smaller, almost childlike. They get practical. Dr. Patel drafts a co-parenting charter, rules written like beams in a house, requests for schedule changes in writing, 48-hour windows for non-emergencies, school events attended without commentary, no introducing new partners until 6 months of consistency, with a heads-up meeting 2 weeks prior. A monthly logistics call moderated by her, capped at 30 minutes, timers visible. They agree on escalation language. Yellow means pause and revisit later, red means table until next session. Holidays go to paper, Thanksgiving odd years with Ethan, Christmas even years with Melissa, summers evenly split. When Melissa circles back, her tone softens. I know I can't ask for much, but please don't see Claire right now. It's hard. Ethan lets the request stand in the air without rescuing it. I won't have an affair, I won't smear you, but I also won't sever friendships to ease your guilt. That isn't a boundary, that's control. Dr. Patel nods once as if stamping approved. They decide on parallel tracks. Melissa continues individual counseling. Ethan continues his own. The kids begin sessions with a child psychologist scaled to their ages. Reading lists shift toward transition, loyalty binds, conflict hygiene. Dr. Patel ends with a reminder. Your children don't need to know who's right. They need to know what happens next. On the sidewalk, the air feels larger than the office. Melissa lingers at the curb. If I keep doing the work, will you ever reconsider? Her voice is fragile, heavy with hope she won't name. Ethan doesn't reach for it. I can't answer a future I don't believe in, he says, but I can keep showing up for the one we're already in. That night, he emails Dr. Patel to confirm the charter in writing. He copies Melissa, adding one line more honest than he expected. Thank you for staying civil today. Her reply comes minutes later. Thank you for not calling me the names I deserve. Ethan closes the laptop. Co-parenting may never be warm, but it can be clean. Before sleep, he touches the folder labeled Next and feels a click inside his chest. Not victory, not relief. Alignment. He will collaborate on tools. He will not collaborate on amnesia. The line has been drawn, and this time it holds. As the paperwork advances from drafts to dates, Melissa changes her strategy. Apologies give way to appetite. The courier drops off envelopes in the morning, and that night Ethan's phone lights up with texts that begin practical but veer toward heat. A playlist titled us. A photo of new lingerie captioned, "Let me prove it." A late-night memory of their first apartment, pressed into a message like a charm she hopes will work again. She argues that desire proves devotion, that wanting him now means she wants their life. Ethan doesn't doubt the wanting, he doubts the conclusion. Desire is not restitution. Touch cannot backdate honesty. She tests windows that used to open, a brush at the sink, a hand that lingers too long when they trade the calendar, a hug that tilts into a kiss before he can name it. Ethan steps back, gentle but firm. "This isn't a test," he says, palms open. "It's a boundary." Her mouth flattens, hurt curdles into anger. "You're punishing me." But Ethan knows better. He isn't punishing, he is protecting the man he intends to remain. Saying no is lonelier than saying yes, but it is the first time in months he feels intact. The playlist arrives anyway, their car song from 2009. The lullaby they overplayed when Lily was a newborn. A voice note whispering his name like a password. A long marriage fills the body with reflexes. Step forward, gather, forgive. Ethan forces his body to unlearn the reflex. He chooses stillness. At night, he remembers the fragments Mason recovered, the eagerness in Melissa's messages to Derek, the flirtations and plans written without hesitation. They had not sounded coerced. They had not sounded confused. They sounded like auditions for a life already chosen. Ethan cannot unknow that, and he refuses to compete with a ghost and call it healing. Melissa weaves contrition into seduction. "I'll give you everything," she promises one night in the hallway, citrus perfume rising like smoke. Total transparency, passcodes, a polygraph, just come to bed. The offer glitters like a chandelier, dazzling, heavy, but bolted to the wrong ceiling. "I'm not bargaining with my body," Ethan answers quietly. "And I won't ask you to bargain with yours. Repair isn't a performance." Their days become a choreography of almosts. She sits too close on the couch, draping a blanket across both their knees, as if fabric could smuggle them back into the past. She leaves an old photo album open on the coffee table until the picture of them at 20 sunburned, laughing, still naive, rises to the top. "We could be that again," she says softly. Ethan studies the picture, his own younger grin bright and easy. "We can be older versions of them," he replies, "but we can't be them." Dr. Patel's words echo like borrowed prayers. Boundaries keep love from becoming leverage. Intimacy is not a shortcut through accountability. Ethan repeats them when his resolve wavers, testing the syllables like railings. He misses touch. He misses the small intimacies that never felt staged, the brush of fingers passing a bowl, the easy sleep on a familiar shoulder. On the worst nights, he imagines knocking on his own bedroom door, begging for an hour where nobody is a defendant. He sits on his hands until the wanting passes, whispering to himself that peace borrowed on those terms always accrues interest he cannot afford. One night the texts arrive in sequence. 1:07 a.m. "I'm awake if you are." 1:09, "I'm sorry." 1:11, a photo of a book on rebuilding trust. Ethan sets the phone face down, staring at the ceiling until the stillness swallows the temptation. In the morning, mercies return in small ways. Packing lunches, James asks if they can invent a new sandwich just for themselves. Lily chooses the music, vetoing the playlist titled us without knowing why. Their chatter sands the sharp edges, reminding Ethan that the world is still larger than one marriage autopsy. That evening, Melissa uses words stripped bare. "I love you," she says without argument attached. Ethan believes she means it. He also knows love is not the same as safety. Safety is what he owes the children. "I love you too," he answers, because the past does not vanish. "And I'm still leaving." The sentence hums like a power line. It does not break. Later that night, Melissa edges toward him again. "Then at least let me hold you," she whispers. "No talking, just let me hold you." It takes Ethan too long to answer because fatigue is a weight and her warmth is a lure. At last he exhales. "No, if we blur lines to feel better for an hour, we'll only be worse tomorrow." She stands there, nods faintly, and walks back down the hall carrying her own gravity. Ethan washes a sink full of dishes he could leave for morning, steadiness settling over him without fanfare. He is not made of stone. He is made of choices. And tonight, his choices are clean. He lies down on the couch that has become a raft, listening to the clock's steady tick. Loneliness still comes, but it finds him less available than the week before. He thinks of the word intact. He tries it on like a jacket. It fits. The affair does not stay confined to Ethan's marriage. It detonates outward, slipping into the places where adults keep their names. Within a week, Melissa resigns from Horizon Media. HR labels it a mutual separation, but colleagues whisper the truth in hushed texts, a scandal with receipts. The citrus perfume that once lingered in the office vanishes. Her chair at Monday stand-up sits empty, a hollow outline of choices she can no longer deny. Derek Lawson's reputation sours faster than anyone predicted. A client pauses a campaign. A board member demands an internal look. Derek issues a memo about boundaries and learning opportunities, polished like a product launch but missing the one word people wanted. Sorry. Social circles fracture into spectators and sympathizers. Those who want to cradle Melissa while rehearsing their own moral lines, and those who just want front-row seats to the spectacle. Ethan avoids both. He declines invitations to talk it out over drinks. He answers curiosity with a single, steady sentence. We're focused on the kids. Focus becomes a schedule, routine the medicine, school drop-offs at the same curb, therapy on Tuesdays, pizza Fridays no matter whose house is hosting. Lily joins the cross-country team, her legs pounding pavement like they are chasing escape. James develops a fascination with space, asking if black holes can swallow bad days whole. They only eat stars, Ethan answers gently and then buys tickets to the planetarium. The co-parenting charter drafted by Dr. Patel becomes their compass taped to the fridge. Written requests, 48-hour windows, no midnight debates. Holidays assigned in ink, not emotion. Melissa starts attending therapy in earnest this time. No staged photos, no performative sighs, just quiet consistency. She blocks numbers. She changes emails. She sends a no-contact message to Derek, drafted by counsel, approved by her therapist. Do not contact me again for any reason. Derek replies once, a long paragraph about closure. Melissa forwards it to her attorney and deletes it without ceremony. She brings home a therapy list titled Amends I Can Actually Make. The items are unglamorous but real. Tell the truth without extras, meet deadlines, arrive early for exchanges, keep my word 4 weeks in a row, apologize without the word but. Ethan notices the shift but refuses to mistake it for redemption. He is not handing out prizes, he is acknowledging reality. When Melissa shows up early 3 times, he thanks her as though punctuality were a bridge rebuilt plank by plank. When she admits, without prompting, that she minimized the harm just to survive it, he nods and lets silence do the work applause would ruin. Compassion is allowed, reconciliation is not required. Claire moves forward with her filing, unflinching. Her texts to Ethan remain brief, useful, hearing set, financials uploaded. Kids okay, soccer Saturday. When Derek tries a driveway conversation, cloaking it as concern for the children, Claire points him to the sidewalk, texts her attorney, then texts Ethan a single word. Handled. Steel, Ethan realizes, isn't always loud. Sometimes it just lasts longer than drama. The social ecosystem recalibrates around them. A couple from the old neighborhood stops inviting Ethan to barbecues until things settle, which means until your story stops making us uncomfortable. Others lean closer, offering normalcy instead of commentary, game nights where no one asks for updates, rides for Lily when practice runs late, a hand on James's shoulder that says nothing but says enough. Melissa edits her space without announcements. The framed photo from the Silver Oak weekend, once hidden in a folder, is gone. The shared bedroom becomes neutral territory. A new duvet, a closet left half empty, a visual truce that acknowledges what paperwork will soon confirm. She throws out the citrus perfume, not because Ethan asked, but because, as she admits later, I don't want to smell like a script I can't live with. Ethan believes her. Belief is not a contract. He keeps his focus narrow, homework before screens, lights out on school nights, Saturdays at Grandma's. The kids begin their own counseling. Lily writes a poem that makes everyone cry in the good way. James molds a clay Saturn announcing he will orbit Dad's house and Mom's house like a moon with a calendar. Ethan places it somewhere safe where it cannot break. Consequences keep unfolding, not as fireworks, but as steady, uncinematic corrections. Budget spreadsheets, attorney invoices, duplicate sneakers, 2 toothbrushes per child. Ethan learns the quiet dignity of mailing forms on time. Melissa learns the quiet dignity of not asking for exceptions when tired. They speak in the kitchen like colleagues who once loved each other, but now love the same 2 people more. One evening, as she heads to therapy, Melissa pauses at the doorway. I know I'm sorry is small next to what I did, she says quietly, but I am. Ethan nods once. Keep doing the work for you, for them. Her nod matches his. 2 climbers acknowledging the rope between them is for the kids, not the past. There are relapses of weather. A rumor flares at horizon. Derek posts a glossy paragraph about resilience, drawing polite likes and silent eye rolls. A well-meaning friend asks Ethan if he's considered trying again now that Melissa is changing. He shakes his head. I can be proud of her progress and still leave. By the time leaves start to turn, their household rhythm feels less like triage, more like life. Papers inch forward. Hearings find slots on calendars. The children's laughter returns, not as a performance, but as a habitat. When Ethan locks up at night, the house no longer feels like a raft held together with rope. It feels like a structure, smaller than before, but solid, scheduled, livable. Not victory, not even relief. Just a hum, steady and low, that sounds a lot like a future he can maintain. Holidays and handoffs slowly become choreography instead of chaos. Thanksgiving on odd years with Ethan. Christmas on even years with Melissa. Spring break split neatly down the center like a folded map. Everything goes on the shared calendar, the driving, the backpacks, even the bedtime reminders. Predictability isn't romance, but Ethan learns that predictability is kindness. The first big handoff happens in the library parking lot, neutral ground with polite lighting. Melissa pulls in 3 minutes early. Ethan is already waiting, the handoff bag packed with toothbrushes, an inhaler, and James's Saturn model that must orbit both households to keep the treaty intact. They keep their voices level, their sentences short. Homework's in the front pocket. Pajamas are the blue set. Lily rolls her eyes, then thanks them both like she's older than her bones. James hugs Ethan too hard, then waves like a sailor about to cross an ocean. Children, Ethan realizes, have their own language for drama, and sometimes it is more honest than adult words. Back at Ethan's house, Friday becomes pizza night even when no one is really hungry. Rituals become railings. Saturday mornings remain pancakes at Grandma's, the maple syrup treaty still alive like a small nation holding out against a noisy world. Bedtime is where the cracks show. James regresses for a week, haunted by nightmares, then rebounds after counseling with a drawing taped above his bed. 2 houses beneath the same moon. Lily experiments with sarcasm that cuts blade sharp. Ethan gives her permission to feel without permission to wound. You're allowed to be mad, he tells her. You're not allowed to be mean. Neutral communication takes practice. They lean on the charter from Dr. Patel like a phrase book for a language they don't want to speak but must. No midnight debates. No sarcasm in text. Requests in writing, not shouted down hallways. Every message must pass the courtroom test. If read aloud, would it embarrass the sender or the children? When tone falters, they borrow stock sentences. I need 20 minutes. Let's move this to text. Can we revisit after pickup? At first, the words feel robotic, but repetition turns them into a new kind of politeness. Grief doesn't honor schedules. It sneaks into grocery aisles where cereal boxes trigger old inside jokes. It sits in the school auditorium when Lily's name is called, and the claps from two parents almost sync, but not quite. It hides at James's soccer game where Ethan and Melissa sit 3 seats apart, passing a water bottle like strangers rehearsing diplomacy. The children see everything, they always do. So Ethan builds a language that doesn't lie. "Are we still a family?" James asks one rainy afternoon in the car. "Yes," Ethan answers, "just shaped different. Lily wants the adult version. So, like broken but functional." Ethan shakes his head. "Like rebuilt, fewer rooms, stronger beams." She doesn't smile, but she accepts the honesty. At Melissa's new apartment, routines begin to take root too. She sets 2 alarms so exchanges aren't rushed. She insists on cooking Sunday dinners even when the meals feel awkward, because awkward isn't reason enough to surrender. She keeps the no-contact boundary with Derek, then explains to the kids in safe language. Grown-ups make mistakes. Grown-ups fix them. None of this is because you forgot a library book or rolled your eyes. When she stumbles, an edge in her tone, a too long explanation, she texts Ethan later, "My bad, I'll clean it up." His reply is brief but real. "Thanks for the repair." Micro-rituals sprout between the rubble. Lily and Ethan share a notes app list called Soundtrack for Surviving 9th Grade, each adding songs in silence, building a soundtrack for resilience. James trades dinosaur facts with Melissa every Tuesday, his way of keeping her orbit steady. Ethan begins sending Sunday night weather reports for the week ahead, 3 bullet points, 1 joke, and always the reminder that they are loved. Melissa counters with Wednesday photo drops, ordinary snapshots of Lily hunched over homework or James slurping spaghetti. Nothing glamorous, nothing curated, just life which is healing in its own right. Still, ghosts linger. At Target, Ethan pauses in front of family-sized cereal and forces himself to reach for smaller boxes. At the dentist, the receptionist asks if they want to schedule together like last time, and the phrase "last time" opens a sinkhole at his feet. In those moments, he chooses the next honest action, 2 reminder cards, 2 boxes, no apology for reality. There are small victories that only reveal themselves later. Melissa texts stuck at Elm. Ida, 12. "I'll make it up Saturday." Ethan replies simply, "Copy." She arrives contrite, not defensive. Lily shrugs because competence is the only apology teenagers accept. James holds up Saturn. "Still orbiting," he says, and the 3 of them laugh, not because it's funny, but because relief sometimes wears that mask. The calendar begins to fill with dull victories. On-time pickups. Lost shoes found where they belong. Lunches that come home empty. Ethan starts to sleep without the couch feeling like a raft. Melissa's apartment collects magnets on the fridge, field trips, race days, parent nights. Evidence that life is being lived, not just survived. One evening after practice, James asks from the back seat, "Dad, is home a place or a person?" "Both," Ethan answers, "and also a promise." James presses his nose against the window, watching the streetlights smear across the glass. "Can the beams be glow-in-the-dark?" Ethan smiles, "If you want them to be." He makes a mental note to buy star stickers. When the first holiday exchange finally comes, there's a hiccup, a grandparent's schedule off by 30 minutes. The kind of thing that once would have exploded into a 3-hour fight no one remembered clearly. This time, they adjust the calendar, send a joint message to the kids. 2 stops, double dessert, same bedtime. That night, Lily sends a selfie from Melissa's porch, 2 thumbs up, James cross-eyed beside her. Ethan types back a single heart emoji. For the first time, the symbol doesn't feel like pretending. It still isn't pretty, but it is progress. And beneath the careful texts, the calendar squares, the routines, they can all feel the frame holding. Love hasn't disappeared. It has simply changed shape. The house they are building for the children has fewer rooms and stronger beams, taped to the fridge for everyone to see with no need to pretend. The house is finally quiet in a way that doesn't feel empty. Dishes dry in the rack. A worksheet on the solar system hangs under a magnet shaped like Saturn. The hallway clock ticks steady, unhurried, no longer measuring tension, but simply marking time. Ethan sits at the kitchen table with a pen that still carries the logo of the bank where he once opened their first joint account. The pen feels almost symbolic, an artifact from a different life, and he realizes something ordinary and enormous. He is done surviving. He has started authoring. The proof is scattered around him in small ways. He no longer measures his worth by the attention Melissa withholds. Instead, he measures it by what he honors without being asked. Truth spoken early, steadiness offered quietly, humor returning uninvited through Lily's texted eye-roll emoji. He laughs not as a performance, but because oxygen has found its way back into his lungs. Ethan pulls a blank index card from the drawer where coupons go to die. He writes in block letters across the top, for next time / for always. The rules arrive quickly as if they'd been waiting inside him for months, only now granted permission to surface. Tell the truth early even if it embarrasses you. Leave before contempt grows teeth. Choose ordinary over spectacle. Ordinary is durable. Protect the kids before image every single time. Repair what's yours. Don't volunteer for what isn't. Never abandon yourself to preserve the story. He hesitates before writing the final one. It had always felt like surrender, but tonight it feels like a vow. If love requires losing yourself, it isn't love you can keep. The bitterness that once felt like armor sits across the table like a tool he no longer needs. It protected him when the house was on fire. Now it only scratches the new floor. He sets it down, not with drama, but with breath. On impulse, he texts Claire, not for solace, not to rehearse his righteousness. Just gratitude stripped to its core. Thank you for being clear when I couldn't be. Her reply arrives a minute later. You did the hard parts. Clarity just kept the map from lying. Ethan smiles at the phrasing, steel wrapped in kindness, and places the phone face down. A closing, not a flinch. He walks through the house, testing the weight of rooms that finally fit their size. The couch where he once slept like a refugee feels like furniture again, not a raft. He straightens the throw blanket, not as ritual, but simply as habit. He opens a window. Cool air moves across the sill. The lemon candle Melissa once used to overwrite the scent of lies now smells only of citrus, uncomplicated and clean. Authoring isn't dramatic. It looks like washing the pan before bed because morning deserves an easy start. It sounds like the message he drafts in the kids' group chat. Field day forms due Friday. Proud of you both. P.S. Pizza treaty remains in force. He flips the card over, writes another heading, what I want, not a secret. The list comes slower, more tender. Conversation that doesn't punish honesty. Loyalty that is daily, not seasonal. Touch that is kind, not currency. A partner who can apologize without but. Laughter that doesn't need an audience to count. He studies the words until the room feels sharper. This, he knows, is the pivot, not the decree that will eventually arrive in a PDF stamped by a judge. Not the lemon-scented lobby of silver oak. Not even the co-parenting charter taped to the fridge. The pivot is this, a quiet evening, a man with a pen, writing down truths he refuses to forget once the world gets noisy again. His phone lights one more time, an email from Dr. Patel confirming their next logistics call. Ethan replies confirmed and adds nothing else. There is no need to narrate boundaries that already exist. Before bed, he snaps a photo of the index card and saves it in a folder labeled Beam Plans. James once asked if beams could glow in the dark. Ethan thinks now that they can. He stands in the hallway taking stock. The ache is still there, but it is the ache of a muscle stretched, not a wound ignored. He has enough left to tell a joke tomorrow. Enough left to say no when no is right. Enough left to say yes when yes is clean. He is not the man who trembled in the silver oak lobby. He is the father who signs permission slips on time, the neighbor who returns borrowed tools, the friend who doesn't confuse suffering with depth. The night doesn't hand him revelation. It gives him something steadier, proportion. He will carry the past like a scar that no longer tricks him about where the pain lives. When he turns off the light, the house doesn't feel haunted. It feels under construction, on schedule, beams aligned. And on the kitchen table, the index card waits in the dark, glowing in its own way. Like a blueprint for a future he finally believes he is qualified to build. The judge's stamp arrives without fanfare, quieter than a slammed door. It comes in an email at 9:14 a.m., subject line trimmed of any drama, final decree entered. Ethan clicks and 21 pages appear on the screen. Sentences written in a dialect the courts understand: equity, custody, decree. Words that never once mention love because they don't need to. Done. That is all the paper really says. Grief, however, arrives on its own schedule. For the next few days, Ethan moves like a man under heavier gravity. He misses ridiculous things: the ease of a single mailbox key, grocery lists that assumed shared sauces, the shorthand of "grab me the blue sweater" meaning exactly the one she preferred without further description. He lets the sadness move through him but doesn't hand it a microphone. Lunches are still packed, forms still signed. Texts to the kids still end with the same 2 words: on time. Quiet consistency becomes his faith statement. Melissa shifts into her new apartment on Maple Street, a smaller space, blinds rattling whenever a truck rolls by. Ethan carries 2 boxes for her, one labeled kitchen, keep, the other kid's art, shared. They don't name the symbolism. Cardboard doesn't need translation. Melissa laughs without humor when the blinds tremble. Guess I'll get used to that. Ethan sets the boxes down, leaves a toolkit on the counter, and walks away without explanation. Some kindnesses are not mixed messages, they're just habit. With heart present, they finalize the civilian details: equity from the house, schedules, summer weeks where July belongs to the lake and August to the orthodontist. Melissa surprises him by being generous in a few splits. Her retirement contributions, an extra week in June she could have argued for. Perhaps it's penance. Perhaps it's strategy. Ethan neither rewards nor punishes it. "Thank you," he says when gratitude belongs. Otherwise, he circles dates and writes confirmed. The house itself is divided like weather. Ethan keeps the Crestwood home, the children's school only 3 blocks away, the maple tree out front a witness to their years. Melissa takes her savings and a buyout heart negotiated to the penny. They sign in quiet conference rooms. Pens move across the pages with a sound like a sigh. Afterward, they sit in the parking lot in separate cars, pretending not to measure how long the other lingers. Ethan doesn't text her. He lets the moment exist without epilogue. When he turns the key, the engine starts on the first try, the simple mercy of reliability. At home, he walks the rooms as if the decree has changed their angles. It hasn't, and it has. The couch is simply a couch again, not a raft. The master bedroom, he decides without bitterness, will become a future guest room. Down the hall, Lily's track ribbon hangs beside James's Saturn model, forming a kind of private coat of arms. He sends the kids a photo with a caption, emblems up. Their replies arrive quickly, emojis he has learned to translate as we see it too. Melissa texts later that night, "I picked up the key fobs and changed the utilities, copying you on confirmations. Thank you for not making it worse." Ethan replies, "Thank you for signing without delay. It isn't warmth, it's clean." Grief spikes on day 3. He oversalts the pasta. He opens a drawer searching for tape and finds a movie stub from the year they were still learning each other's language. He sits on the floor, letting the memory pass through rather than build a campfire. Then he writes one sentence on an index card and pins it to the corkboard. Today isn't testimony about yesterday. It steadies him. Hart emails another checklist. Record the decree with the county, update beneficiaries, red idle the cars. Bureaucracy, boring and perfect for a heart that shouldn't be left alone with too much silence. Ethan takes a morning off work, stands in 2 lines, signs 4 forms, and walks out lighter by ounces he only notices at stoplights. They meet once more at a coffee shop to trade final items. The spare garage remote, the forgotten library card, the last set of keys. Melissa slides across a small box containing her wedding ring. The metal glints like an artifact of someone else's story. "I can't keep it," she murmurs. "It doesn't say what I wanted it to say." Ethan closes the box gently. "I'll take care of it." It's the most honest promise 2 ex-spouses can make about a shared history. When the conversation threatens to tip toward postmortem, he steers it back to logistics. Summer camp balances, Lily's shoe size, the teacher who prefers email to the portal. Melissa follows. They cannot reconcile a marriage with bullet points, but they can build a bridge for two children that way. They part with a nod, not cold, not sentimental, just accurate. That afternoon Claire texts saw the stamp. Proud of you, you good? Ethan answers, tender, functional, you. She replies with a photo of her girls at a soccer field, hair tangled in wind, joy uncurated. Same. Gratitude fills him not as anesthesia, but as a quiet road back to himself. That weekend, Ethan and the kids plant daffodil bulbs along the fence. Lily reads aloud that daffodils can handle neglect and still return. James digs furiously, declaring he is negotiating with Mars. They label a row April in chalk. Ethan shows them the decree only as an idea, the paperwork that lets schedules make sense and houses have names. So we're officially two houses now, Lily asks. Officially, Ethan nods. Unofficially, still us. James asks if daffodils will bloom at both places. If we plant them, Ethan says, pressing another bulb into his son's hand, then yes. On Sunday night, he sits at the same kitchen table the decree didn't take, reading while the dishwasher hums. He is surprised by how uncinematic it feels. No fireworks, no curtain call, just a firm period at the end of a sentence that ran too long. He no longer mistakes quiet for emptiness. Sometimes quiet is just quiet. Before bed, he sends one last email to Hart and Dr. Patel, subject line, thank you. The body only 2 lines, for keeping this clean, for keeping us decent. He turns off the kitchen light. The house settles around him like a coat that finally fits. Dinner with Claire is not a date, until it is. They choose a small restaurant across town, the kind of place where the waiter learns names quickly and the lighting forgives. Ethan arrives early, instinctively choosing a booth with a view of the door. Claire arrives on time, smiling like someone who has learned not to overpromise her face. They talk about everything but the past until the past slips in anyway. Children's homework, construction detours, the absurdity of forms that ask you to list your marriage like an appliance. Neither of them flinches when the word divorce lands between the salt shaker and the water glasses. Flirtation feels unfamiliar, like borrowing a suit he isn't sure will fit. A compliment that isn't a rescue. A joke not aimed at anyone. Claire asks about Lily's track meet. Ethan asks about her girl's science fair. They trade small victories like postcards, on-time mornings, fewer tears at handoffs, a teacher who said exactly the right sentence at exactly the right time. When the waiter reappears, they order without consulting each other. The small act feels larger than it should, 2 people making choices unshadowed by someone else's permission. Eventually, the audit they both promised not to avoid arrives. Claire asks, plain and unflinching, "What do you want from tonight?" Ethan answers just as plainly. Not anesthesia, not secrecy, not a triangle. Her relief is visible. No triangles, she echoes. She adds her own conditions, pace, privacy, kids first. Built-in daylight, Ethan says, testing the phrase. She repeats it, and the words fall between them like blueprints. The evening warms gradually, like good weather sneaking in. Claire tells a story about learning to parallel park at 29, battling her ridiculous fear of parking tickets. Ethan counters with James's theory that black holes exist just to tidy the universe. They laugh the kind of laugh you can't post online because a camera would make it perform. Then the past enters more directly. Claire admits to the envy she never wanted to name. The way Melissa seemed effortless in rooms where she always felt like an understudy. Ethan admits to the humiliation of competing with a ghost version of himself, the one Melissa kept praising while living another life. They say the names aloud, Derek, Melissa. The room doesn't tilt. The intimacy, if it comes later, will not be built on pretending those people never existed. It will be built on telling the truth with the lights on. Ethan is careful. He says it before the night goes further. I won't use you as an exit ramp from grief, no matter how smooth the lane looks. Claire nods, unoffended. I didn't bring an orange cone, she replies. I brought a calendar. Half joke, half promise, we go slow, we go real. Still, something electric passes between them. Her hand brushes his on the table. Neither apologizes. When she pushes her plate toward him, inviting him to try what she ordered, their forks meet, and the electricity is not teenage. It is adult, measured, undeniable. Ethan feels the difference in his chest, desire that isn't a test, attention that doesn't need an audience, tenderness that doesn't have to pass a loyalty check. They leave the restaurant together, stepping into a night that smells like rain just beginning. On the sidewalk, they pause without planning to. Retreat would be easier. They don't retreat. The first kiss is not cinematic, it is precise. A yes without a speech. Ethan's hands remember how to be kind. Claire's hands remember what it means to be held without shrinking first. And when intimacy follows, and it does, it comes carefully, without choreography, without anyone proving or buying anything. For the first time in years, morning will not arrive carrying shame. Morning does come, indifferent but generous. They make coffee like people following instructions. Grounds, water, wait. They draft rules as they sip. No introductions to kids until months of consistency. No social media. No sleepovers on exchange nights. If they travel, it will be planned and boring, not adrenaline disguised as love. They do not write a contract, but the rules are clear enough to stand. Ethan texts the family group chat a photo of the dog sprawled in a square of sunlight, adding field day forms due Friday. He doesn't explain where he is or why he slept well. He doesn't need to. He isn't sneaking. He isn't performing. He is living in a sequence that makes sense to him even when reread. Claire ties her hair back and laughs at nothing. The sound is small, bright, startling in its purity. Whatever this is, she says, I don't want to build it in whispers. Daylight, Ethan answers. They clink mugs, modest ceremony. It counts. Later, in separate cars, they text the same thought in different words. From Ethan, grateful, going slow. From Claire, same. Careful feels good today. Ethan drives the long way home, not to prolong the moment, but to test it. His chest doesn't collapse when he passes the Silver Oak exit. The hotel is just a building again. At home, the house receives him with factual compassion. He switches the laundry, folds Lily's track shirt, pauses, staring at his own hands, hands that can comfort without bargaining, repair without rescuing, hold without hiding. He remembers the index card taped to the corkboard. Choose ordinary over spectacle. Never abandon yourself. Last night qualified. Tonight does too. He texts Claire one more time, kids first, always. She replies with a check mark and a photo of her grocery list. Milk, apples, courage. Ethan laughs, alone, and does not feel alone. The storm didn't bless him, it gave him a door, and at last he has stepped through. On a quiet night between permission slips and pickups, Ethan sits at the kitchen table and begins to distill the wreckage into railings. Not commandments for the world, just guardrails for himself. He flips open the same stack of index cards that once carried grocery lists and bedtime reminders, and this time he writes what his bones already know. Respect isn't a perk, it's the floor. Marriage can survive boredom, busyness, even bad jokes, but it collapses the moment basic regard becomes negotiable. Ethan vows never to haggle for decency again. If respect thins, he will name it early and leave before contempt grows teeth. Secrets devour intimacy long before discovery. The nights of tilted screens, the half-hidden laughs were not neutral. They altered the air before proof existed. Ethan remembers how his body knew before his mind admitted it, the heartbeat changing when Melissa leaned away from his laughter. Next time, if secrecy takes up residence, he will choose daylight. Children read the house more accurately than adults admit. Tell them truths they can carry. Lily's sarcasm had been fluent grief. James's Saturn model was a blueprint for survival, 2 homes orbiting 1 moon. When they asked, "Are we still a family?" the answer was yes, just shaped differently. Ethan promises never to outsource their safety to image. Truth, scaled to their age, will always be the answer. Sex is not currency for peace. He remembers the playlists, the whispered offers, the doorway pleas. Desire can be honest and still the wrong tool. Intimacy without accountability is anesthesia, and the hour after is always worse. If saying no costs him comfort, it is still the only price he can afford. Remorse can be real without guaranteeing reunion. Melissa did the work, therapy, timelines, amends. Ethan honors that, but he doesn't translate her effort into a ticket back. Two things can be true: she can change and he can still leave. Compassion is human, capitulation is optional. Love again, but not at the cost of yourself. With Claire, he has learned what pace and daylight feel like. Boundaries are scaffolding, not cages. If a new love requires shrinking, lying, or performing, he will not audition. He wants conversation that doesn't punish honesty, touch that isn't currency, loyalty that is daily, not seasonal. Forgiveness is a practice. Closure is a discipline. He forgave by refusing to humiliate, by staying civil, by focusing on the children. Closure arrived in forms and boundaries, not in speeches. When bitterness masquerades as armor, he will lay it down before it dents the floor. Facts are oxygen when memory bends. The ledgers, the screenshots, the fragments Mason found, these were not props, they were life rafts. Under pressure, recollection flatters what hurts us. Next time he will document early, not to prosecute love, but to protect judgment. Gossip is sugar. Routine is food. He turned down the barstool confessions. He chose pizza Fridays, algebra on the counter, bedtime jokes migrating back like birds. He knows now that routine sustains long after outrage burns off. Do not humiliate each other even at the end. The old rule survived every storm. He carried it through the lobby at Silver Oak, through the decree. If there must be a final word, let it be a date on a form, not a scene. Let the children clap at recitals without scanning the room for danger. He writes each line in plain handwriting, then flips the card and adds one more, the one that has quietly guided him for months. Choose ordinary over spectacle. Ordinary is durable. He tapes the card under the fridge magnet shaped like a tiny house, then photographs it and files it into the folder labeled Beam Plans. James was right. Beams can glow in the dark if you let them. Ethan walks the rooms and tests the guardrails. They hold. When he pauses at the window, his reflection stares back. For the first time, he recognizes the man looking at him. Not a hero, not a cautionary tale, just a father with steady hands, a partner in the making who knows what he will and won't trade. The lessons no longer weigh him down. They are light enough to carry, strong enough to lean on, etched deep enough to outlast weather. Months pass and the home is smaller now, but brighter. 2 bedrooms, 1 stubborn window that sticks when the weather turns humid, light that pours in like a habit. The couch is no longer a raft. It is where James builds Lego spacecraft, where Lily edits playlists she insists are ironic but secretly loves. Laughter returns in ordinary intervals, after homework in the car at red lights, during the walk back from the mailbox when the dog insists every leaf is a coded message. Co-parenting remains a maze, but the dead ends grow fewer. The charter doctor, Patel drafted, has turned into muscle memory. Requests in writing, 48-hour windows, no midnight debates. Holidays no longer feel like negotiations. They feel like choreography, 2 houses trading routines without stepping on toes. When hiccups happen, the solutions are dull but blessed. A text, a swap, a thanks for the switch. Lily calls it adulthood boring addition. Coming from a teenager, Ethan takes it as high praise. Melissa keeps going to therapy. She looks healthier now in ways no fitness app could measure, steadier in her speech, quicker to repair, fewer spirals into fog. Sometimes hope still flickers in her eyes, hope for what Ethan no longer offers. He wishes her well from a distance that is kind to them both. They talk about the children like architects discussing load-bearing walls. What holds, what needs reinforcement, what cannot be touched for the sake of appearances. When grief arrives, it does so without spectacle. Melissa texts, having a rough day, I'll keep it out of the handoff. Ethan replies, appreciate the heads up. It is not romance, it is respect. The floor they now both stand on. With Claire, labels stay modest while their practice remains serious. Girlfriend, partner, words that don't need trumpets. They keep the rules they wrote on that morning after. Pace, privacy, kids first, no triangles. After months of consistency, they follow the therapist's script for introductions. Neutral places, low expectations, easy exit ramps. A park with bad coffee and excellent swings. A casual hello at the planetarium where James has declared his loyalty to the moon, while Claire's girls argue about which exoplanet has better fashion sense. No auditions, no pressure, just slow trust layered like bricks. Daylight is how they build. No social media soft launches. No secret weekends requiring backfilled stories. If they travel, it is planned and boring. A farmer's market 2 towns over, a matinee movie when most people are at work, a hike long enough to make silence feel like luxury again. When something between them breaks, they reach for tools, not theater, statements, a timer, a walk. The masterpiece is that there is no masterpiece, just practice. Ethan discovers new joys that owe nothing to anyone else's loss. Teaching Claire's youngest to ride a bike in a parking lot marked with chalk lines, followed by celebratory ice cream. Cheering Lily's relay leg with a quiet fist pump that says, "I see you, not look at me." Sitting beside Melissa at a school concert, both of them clapping on the same beat, no one keeping score. The world did not break apart. It repatterned. Work settles into rhythm as well. Ethan's team ships a design he's quietly proud of. He starts eating lunch away from his desk, a luxury he once mistook for laziness. On Thursdays, he walks a loop around Crestwood with a thermos of coffee and a podcast that sells him nothing. Humor sneaks back. He texts Claire a grocery list that reads milk, batteries, courage, and she sends back a check mark and a terrible pun. There are still shadows. Rumors flare briefly at horizon. Derek posts a glossy paragraph about leadership lessons learned. It collects polite likes and silence. Ethan scrolls past, his pulse unchanged. Some storms simply relocate to other zip codes. The house begins to carry new earned symbols. On the corkboard, the Beam Plans index card, Lily's track schedule, James's drawing of 2 houses beneath one moon. Above Ethan's desk, a photo from a Saturday picnic where the kids mocked his sandwich architecture until he pretended offense. In the hallway, glow-in-the-dark stars, James insisted on sticking to the ceiling the night he asked if beams could shine. They do, faint but stubborn, each time the lights go out. On a Sunday evening that smells of roasted apples and laundry soap, Ethan and Claire piece together a week. Carpools, therapy, a deadline, a dentist appointment. The logistics take 15 minutes. The tenderness takes less. They set aside an hour on Friday just for themselves. A walk, a pot of tea, a joke too small to survive transcription. This isn't a happy ending, Ethan says, half to her, half to himself. It's a true one. Claire nods as if truth itself is the rarest kind of romance. Later, Ethan texts Melissa about Lily's shoe size, then adds, "Good job on the science packet, follow through." Her reply is simple, thanks. No subtext, no bait, just 2 parents who are finally better at this part than they used to be. He thinks of the judge's stamp, the lemon lobby, the ledger on his phone, the couch that isn't a raft anymore, and the door he chose when he could have stayed pacing the same hallway forever. The next morning, sunlight finds its way past the stubborn window, spilling across the kitchen table where permission slips weight like small votes for the future. Ethan signs them, packs lunches, slides a sticky note into each bag. 2 jokes, 2 sentences that matter. You are loved. You are safe. James salutes with a spoon. Lily pretends to roll her eyes and doesn't. Ethan locks the door, pockets the keys, and steps out into weather that belongs to no one. His life is no longer defined by what was hidden from him. It is defined by what he chooses in daylight, pizza on Fridays, hard conversations on Tuesdays, walks that keep his feet attached to the ordinary. And for the first time, ordinary feels extraordinary enough. And that brings us to the end of I served my cheating wife divorce papers at her secret hotel affair. In the end, Ethan proved that betrayal always carries a price and that self-respect is stronger than living in lies. But let me ask you, if you were in Ethan's place, would you have done the same, or would you have given Melissa another chance? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Cheating Stories 7, and share your opinion. Your support keeps these stories alive. Until next time, thank you for watching, and remember, betrayal has consequences, but truth always sets you free.